You guys ready?
Yep.
Mm,
Except for Blake.
except for me. That's not right.
Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Based on a True Story. I'm on location. My name is Matt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Stollznow.
And here in modernity, I'm Blake Smith. Yeah.
Yeah. uh, Matt, you fit in perfectly for this. This is great.
Yeah, well, I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted,
Very
to
Mike.
be out
Yeah.
in the, yeah. Uh,
Well,
What are we talking about today? What movie are we watching? What?
I think it was maybe the Blair Witch Project.
I know,
You
no,
need the snot
no.
out
The
of the
snot. The
nose
snot is a nice
and the
touch. Yeah, yeah,
tears. Yeah.
yeah. So
All right, fine.
Ah,
At least I have the rainwater, so,
yep,
that's
yep.
good. That's
so,
good. That's
so.
good.
Oh yeah,
Hey,
our last episode of Monster Talk Live, we talked about legend tripping. So we thought to kind of pair up that show. We talk about the Blair Witch Project, which is yet another highly requested movie that listeners and viewers have asked us to talk about.
well, it's interesting because typically we're talking about movies that are based based on
Hmm.
real events, and this is one that pretended to be based on real events, but spoilers was all
Hmm.
made up.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, this show's all about
Completely
spoilers, so
unlike Amityville.
yeah, this yeah still parallels. But we should
lots.
say
So
to everyone, if you have not seen the film, I think the majority of people watching this have seen the Blair Witch Project.
yeah,
Pause this, go watch it, then come back because this show is all about spoilers.
Spoilers.
and what's the documentary? It was released on the Sci-Fi Channel back in the day, but it's the Curse of the Blair Witch.
Curse of the Blair Witch, yeah.
You really want to
Well,
watch that too. So I think.
I
If you
want to
can watch it
know.
first,
Well,
it's. I mean, that's how
But
many of
Karen,
us at
I
the
want to hear.
time got to watch it. Got to watch it
Right.
first, and that made such an impact.
well, what I want to know is, did you guys see the documentary before you saw the movie? Because
I did,
Yes.
yeah.
I don't know if it's screened in Australia or not. Because I saw when the movie came out, it was released at midnight one night, one morning, and so I went and saw that at the cinema. But I don't believe that the documentary had been shown before, and so I was one of the many people going into the movie thinking that this was true, real found footage. And yeah, it was an interesting experience to say the least because I sat right down the fronts,
Oh
and
no.
I've got eye issues and vestibular issues, so I was running out. I missed half the movie feeling sick. Other people were running out scared. I was running out nauseous.
I
And
I
it was a
I
popular reaction.
yeah. Did you? Where did you see it, Matt? I'd love to talk about how we all saw it originally. This is interesting.
Well, originally I saw the documentary on Sci-Fi, is where it played, and then I went to BlairWitch.com and got to see more clips of just
Yeah.
how
You
real
had
this
internet
is.
then?
Yeah, I did. I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Me
Yeah, I
too.
was I was one of the
It's early
original
days.
trolls, but
I had an ISDN line at the time. Good times. It was
wow, yeah.
I think I'd just gotten a very slow connection. Things are still slow in Australia with internet, but
No, we got lucky in Arvada, Colorado. Comcast was testing their brand new cable internet, and
ooh,
we were one of the test areas, so I got to have pretty high speed for that time.
okay.
Right up front. So that was nice for all my Blair Witch research at the time,
Mhm.
because nobody I knew was a skeptic about it.
Yeah. No.
Everybody seemed to totally believe. My boss at work was like, "Oh yeah, no, I remember when they went missing, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing. I remember, because I used to live right
Oh,
by the Black Hills, and yeah, I know all about the Blair Witch. So
fantastic.
it is funny. I think they did a great job. Oh, by the way, this is what was it, a 1999
Yes.
release,
Yes. Yep.
and it was with I'm trying to think of who it was that released it. Let me see here. Blah 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 blah. It was purchased by. I keep thinking Miramax, but it was Artisan
Hmm.
Entertainment
Yeah.
that purchased
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Um, But yeah, these two guys kind of wrote up this story, and then they went and found three people to torture that wanted to be tortured willingly. So it's kind of like that German guy who posted the ad for, you know, I want to eat you.
Just like that, just
Just
like that,
very
yeah.
similar to that.
But I mean, those guys did they did write the script, but at the same time, I think they started with a 35-page script, but most of it was improvised. I
Improv.
mean,
It's
it was a
largely improv. Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic job, really,
I
that
mean,
the
yeah. I
actors
mean,
did.
how they produced the film is a fascinating story. I did want to point out, like mention that I also saw it as an event, you know, in the indie cinema around Atlanta. Me and my friends got together and watched it. And this is before I got married, but Kathleen went with me. And I just
Date
remember,
night.
yeah, date night,
Yeah.
yeah. It was, you know, back when we used to have friends who would all actually go to the theater at the same, we'd get a whole row to our friends. You know, I mean, gosh, it's been a long time since I've gotten more than 2 or 3 people to go to the movies together. You know, probably a product of getting older, but I really enjoyed the experience because, like you say, even there and standing in line, people were discussing whether it was real or not. And in the cinema, people were getting nauseous and other people were just disturbed. When I got ready to rewatch it for this, my my daughters wanted to watch it with me. One backed out due to very important video game obligations. And the other,
Fair enough.
I don't want to say chickened out, but she got concerned after we watched the Curse of the Blair Witch. There were clips from the film in there, and you could see how intense the screaming and the anxiety is of the actors. And she got very uptight about whether or not she was going to be able to handle this and then just go right to bed. And I'm like, you know what? I'll watch it by myself again, and then we'll watch it together in the daytime when you have some time to decompress afterwards. So you're not like going to roll into a school day all or whatever, all hyped up, you know?
Right.
Well, Blade happened to stumble in when we were watching it too, and he was pretty distressed by it. Where's Josh? What happened to Josh?
Yeah.
Is he gonna die? Is he okay? Yeah.
So yeah, can we start by talking about the documentary, because this was originally supposed to be one piece. It was going to be one story with.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, they basically decided to edit it out, make the documentary its own thing, and then have the film. And there's enough of that stuff left in the film that you can understand the story.
Yeah.
But I think, I really like the documentary. I mean,
me too. In some ways, I think that was the best part, and it was just so well crafted with the marketing and all of the evidence that they had for these missing film students. I mean, they
should have won the Academy Award for marketing, because that's
financially
very
they
clever.
did.
Yeah, that's what this show was. Yeah, money wise, yeah.
But I just thought. Oh, I thought the evidence that they put forward too. I mean, they had woodcuts and they had books and they had newspaper clippings. They had missing persons posters, and it was just so rich and really just wound to put together so well that it was very convincing. And to see that in and of itself was really terrifying.
The absolute lose my mind happy moment is the 1970s documentary buried inside the fake documentary. Like, was it Mystical Occurrences?
The
or
Witch.
something?
The Wiccan.
Yeah.
Oh God, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. That was it felt so real. It felt
that
so
was
real.
Hilarious. Yeah. Well, I think my favorite part was the mother just talking about the Blair Witch and her experiences as a kid.
Oh,
and
with
she's
the
holding
kid.
her daughter,
yeah.
and the daughter constantly covering her mouth and her saying, "Oh, look, I'm just telling a scary story. It's not true." Yes, it is. I thought that was genius. And so Matt and I came across a really interesting little documentary, didn't we, on YouTube?
Yeah, well, it was a very badly done interview. Is what it was. I don't know if you happen to see it, Blake, but it was the mother and the daughter, and like the daughter's grown up and engaged to be married and everything else, and they went to the exact same spot, and the mother kind of told the story about what happened on that day.
Oh wow!
It wasn't in Burkittsville either. It was in Brunswick.
Yes,
which is kind of nearby.
And
famous for their stew.
Yes, and their bowling lanes.
And their bowling. That was actually the first thing that popped in my head. Yeah. Brunswick Lanes, very popular bowling.
Exactly. So after bowling a perfect 300, basically what had happened is the three students, Heather, Mike, and Josh, were out trying to interview people. The directors were nowhere to be found. It was just those three. And
I think
so
they went to a diner and were just
yeah.
asking people, and everyone was saying, "Oh no, no one wanted to be a part of it at
Yeah.
all."
So this woman, I guess, had been a teacher, and her heart went out to these poor students who couldn't get anyone to be on camera. And she said, "Yeah, I'll be on camera." So immediately they asked her, "Have you ever heard of the Blair Witch?" And she's like, "No." And Heather was like, oh. And then she's like, "Okay, we'll do it again. I'll just make something up. Okay, I'll just do it again." So she does. She starts just making up the story. It was beautiful. And she just thinks she's helping these film students. She has no idea. And it was and the little girl she was saying she has anxiety problems, and she gets to a point where she's done and she just wants to go.
Like all kids, yeah.
Like all kids, yeah. And I'm thinking, it's not a unique thing for your kid. But anyway, it's the kid was just wanting to go, but it fit in so perfectly. It was
like came across as fear. Yeah, don't talk about the witch.
Like, stop it! Stop telling that scary story. Yeah.
And then for her to ad lib that little bit about, "I'm just telling a scary story. It's not true." That was perfect to tag on the end of it.
It was.
So to find out that she had no idea. 3 years later, she has people starting to call her. "I didn't know you were in the movies."
Yeah.
And she had no idea that that was actually going to be in a feature film. So I think it's a really funny story how that all fell together.
And the daughter to this day tells everyone, "Hey, I'm the little girl in the Blair Witch Project," and people think it's cool.
She went to a Korn concert, the heavy metal group Korn, and her fiance is like, "You got to tell him, you got to tell him." And I guess they got backstage or something, and all the guys in Korn are like, "Oh, that's the coolest," and hilarious how that all fell.
Excellent. I mean, just the acting in that seems so natural. The sheriff and the lawyer and just the different characters. I mean, there was a whole bunch of acting
with the lab coat.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the fact that they had people who were. Well, that's probably not exactly what happened. That's probably this. That's probably. I was like,
but it was strange.
Yeah. And when you have I think there's the anthropology guy who's talking about. Yeah, this is outside of the realm of science. We don't know, because I mean, the story about how the film canisters are found in an archaeological dig is superb, because it throws in this unexplainable supernatural element.
And the evidence too, just the old bits of equipment and everything.
Well, how they have them laid out on the table, and they all
absolutely. It looked great. It was great, and the fact they did a lot of things that really subtly. Like, if you're into the occult and weird stuff as we are, it rings familiar or true. The witch's name in the story. Well, I guess we should tell the story of the Blair Witch legend. Is that this community of Blair had a woman who lived there. And this is like in the 1780s, so it was like way later than the witch trials.
Yes,
but they had this community, and
they were still going on in Europe though at the same time. But
are they ever over? Are they ever over?
That's
true.
Yeah. Great point.
Good point.
So she's condemned by the community and sent out to die in the elements. They take her out in the winter and tie her to a tree, and then her body disappears. But then later, all the people who accused her of witchcraft start disappearing, and then eventually the whole town ends up basically falling apart, and then the city gets leaving, right? And then the town gets rediscovered, and then the murders or deaths continue, and it's always like every 50 to 60 years this happens. But one of the first things that really struck me is the witch's name is Ellie Kedward, which is like a spoonerism of Edward Kelly, who was the right-hand man of John Dee, the mystic and astrologer of Queen Elizabeth. Right. So it's like it automatically, like in the back of your mind, if you're into this stuff, like that sounds really familiar. I think I've heard of this legend before. Not really, but it's well inspired.
Yeah. Well, and the serial killer Rustin Parr, he had also that very familiar name that was actually started off as an anagram of Rasputin.
Oh, nice.
And it worked really well in a lot of levels. But the Blair Witch, that also sounds like the Bell Witch.
It does a bit.
You're automatically feeling this familiarity.
This is familiar.
With the story. So you were going to say, Karen.
I can't remember now.
I'm so sorry.
The story of Rustin Parr, the hermit. So I think we should give a content warning too, that we're going to be talking about death of children in this show as well.
Yes, absolutely.
But I mean, that was a really creepy story about what a guy who lived in the 1940s, and how he had kidnapped 7 children, and then he'd killed them, and he'd always had a second child there as well who he would keep in the corner, and then he would be bringing back more children as well. But it was interesting the way they had that kind of interview with him too. I think he was on death row, and they had this news interview with him, and he was talking about how he'd been led to do this by this witch, or by someone else, and he'd been hearing voices.
Some voice, yeah.
And how he'd even gone into town when he'd finished and said, "Oh, now I'm done. Now I've done everything I have to do." So it was like he was being controlled by someone or something.
Yeah, and it was weird to me. I was trying to reevaluate this when I watched the thing in '99, the documentary. Something about that segment struck me as like the only part that didn't feel real. And I was rewatching it with Sophie, and we were kind of discussing it. And this is so subtle, and I don't know why this bothered me. But there's a moment when you're watching, it's supposed to be newsreel. And the first thing is most newsreels are shot on a tripod, so they're not shaky cam.
Yeah.
And there was some shakiness. But there's a scene where you see from the ground looking up that people are going into that area where he's being kept. And then immediately it cuts to a behind the shoulder scene of the guard. And there's usually only one camera in these newsreels that you see. So it was like, how did they get a second anyway, this is dumb. I don't know why this bothered me, but like that one thing kind of like blew the authenticity, and it's really subtle. And I'm not 100% sure that's why that one segment felt weird to me. But the story narratively is perfect. Narratively is great. Yeah.
I think the thing that bugged both Matt and myself was hearing the teacher, the film school teacher, and he was talking about the students, and he was talking about their abilities, and he was really raving about Heather and just what a wonderful student she was. But then he was kind of dissing on Josh a bit, and saying that he didn't think that Josh was a good influence. And it just seemed a little unprofessional. And here they are supposedly
they're missing, right?
or deceased, and he's ragging on him and saying bad stuff about him. But it made me think too, just watching that again, that you would assume that maybe Josh was behind something then for him to be, saying such negative things about him, that maybe that was going to come into play, and it never really did. So I don't know, very, very small thing though.
It was almost like there's an implication that Josh was into the occult or something, and he was
possibly
bringing all this down on him. But it was,
or that
really
the teacher had a crush on Heather or something. I don't know. It was a bit weird.
Yeah, that also seems like could be. And I did really enjoy the one guy. What was he? He was kind of criticizing the sheriff and everything, and his behaviors were perfect for being interviewed like that. It was great.
Yeah. Well, the whole documentary was so convincing. And I think they put up on the IMDb pages of all of the actors that they were missing or that they were deceased. And apparently Heather's mother was receiving sympathy cards from people because they assumed that she had died. I mean, it was just that prolific and convincing.
Yeah, at the very end, the credits they list them as actors, but that's really kind of the only tell in the movie that it's not. And, there's always the thing at the end that says, the things that you've just seen are fictional, based, they're not real. But that's kind of legalese. I mean, you watch a movie about Nixon, it's like these characters are all made up. I'm pretty sure Nixon was a real guy.
But there was so much to the documentary too, and to the story. I mean, it was a really rich story. I mean, the tale at Coffin Rock, where there were those 5 men who were part of a search party going in search of, I think it was a little girl, wasn't it, who went missing?
Right, a little girl who went missing, who came back. She got escaped. But
Robin Weaver was her name. Yeah.
There you go. And while she was she made it back, but the search party disappeared. When they found them, they were all disemboweled and tied together,
like ritualistically murdered. Yeah. But I thought it was interesting that the little girl said that she had seen this woman who was floating above the ground and her feet never touched the ground, and all of the different descriptions of the witch too. And they had different images of her. There's one where she kind of looks like Medusa, and she's got all this hair or twigs or
there's some super creepy
snakes or something. And then in other pictures she looks like this young woman, and then an elderly woman. And so it's really interesting the way they weave everything together. And
I wonder if that was a subtle sort of Hecate, the mother, the maiden, the old crone.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yep. They do make a mention that she would show herself in many different forms depending on what would scare the person the most. And so,
oh, there's the hairy version of her as
the
well.
Oh, like
yeah.
a horse or something.
Mary
Yeah.
getting interviewed with her Bible was really weird, bizarre, and yet really real. I mean,
Yeah,
And that
we
was
all
actually
know
in the
her.
movie, though. That was in the
Yeah,
doc.
that was in the
was
movie.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, and we all seem to know that woman. You know, anyone
Yeah.
who's lived in a
but
small town.
in the South, yeah.
That woman seemed incredibly authentic. Yeah, I went to church with her, and many,
Lots of them, yeah.
many of her. So,
well, I guess we've talked about the documentary, and I think we should start talking about the film now. And yeah, so it's like a found footage style film.
Yeah.
And you've got these three filmmakers who set out as Heather's project to go and investigate the story of the Blair Witch. Did we mention too that Blair doesn't exist any longer? It's now Burkittsville.
Right. And apparently they still get a lot of legend trippers coming up there.
Apparently the signs get stolen a lot too, and they've had to continually replace the city signs.
When your signs are continually stolen, that's a sign you need to open up a sign shop selling signs.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's literally a sign that you should be selling signs.
Well,
so.
we have a street here in Denver called Corona Street. And they still they've got these locking nuts on the street signs and everything. People still stealing them. And yeah, why aren't they for sale? Why doesn't Denver recognize
Sounds like
that
a
as
business,
an opportunity? But it's we know that story. They definitely had stolen a lot. And so yeah, these great big signs that the one that's in the shot, they've had to change the design so people aren't tempted to steal it anymore. Is what they ended up doing instead of using that as a moneymaker for the city.
And maybe they do, who knows? Or haven't been there, it would be fun to get there. But maybe there is a souvenir store. So if anyone has been there and you want to let us know if there's anything like that, even stickers or something.
We haven't checked to see if there's any proto festivals going on, but if you'd like to learn more about proto festivals, stay tuned to Monster Talk.
Check out the next episode, forthcoming episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons we chose this movie was because of the fact that our last live episode was about legend tripping. And this is kind of the ultimate legend tripping. Yeah, you did. But I just want to say, this is kind of the ultimate legend tripping movie.
Yeah.
And that's, we even though it's not based on a true story, it's claiming to be based on a true story. And with that, I know that we're in the midst of talking about the movie, but just really quickly, at what point does it switch over from really good marketing to actually being a hoax?
Yeah, I do think that that's a good question because, I mean, I think in some ways you could classify it as a hoax because they released the documentary first. I don't know if that was initially intended to be that way or if it was something that happened organically over time when they were in production and doing their marketing. But yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one to classify. Blake was talking about that earlier. Is it based on a true story or is it the reverse?
Is life imitating art or is art imitating life? Well, the thing is back in the 80s, this just came back into my memory that there was this show on, I believe it was NBC that showed it, and it was supposed to be maybe a film crew that was taken hostage by these people on this boat that had a nuclear weapon that were going to detonate it. And
oh my gosh, yeah, I know what
you remember that. Yeah, it was being shown as this is an actual news thing, but every time they went to a commercial break, it would say this is not real.
Yeah, it was very much in the it was a terroristic kind of and it doesn't end well.
Right, but it was done in the same sort of spirit as War of the Worlds.
I was just going to say, you make me think of Orson Welles as well.
With terrorism and a nuke. Yeah.
But the thing is they kind of learned the lesson that Orson Welles didn't, and that's they constantly were saying, this is not real. This is not real.
And even then, they probably still have people who were believing in it.
A ton of people that were calling in and panicking.
People watching bits and pieces, yeah.
Absolutely. But that's one thing that this film did not do in any of the marketing. They did not say, this is fictional. They did not do that. The only tells were the credits, were the only real tells.
Now, I want to say that I was wrong because after this film happened, I said, because of the internet, this will never happen again. This is a beautiful nexus point where there's not enough internet awareness to look this kind of stuff up. So nobody will ever pull a hoax like this again. Paranormal Activity.
Yes, they were inspired by the Blair Witch. Absolutely. Yep.
They clearly came along and just took this to the next level. And yeah. So, I mean, it still can be done. And I would, even though I want to say, well, now it can never be done, I would say, yes, it can. So, yeah.
They'll find a way. I mean, the thing is every once in a while, big budget Hollywood needs a spanking.
Yeah.
And that's basically what this was. And then they scrambled on found footage movies. Another thing is there was one that was 20 years before this that was banned in so many places that a lot of people still don't know it exists, and that's Cannibal Holocaust. And
apparently the directors hadn't seen that, and they said, "Oh, we wouldn't have made this if we'd seen that." So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
or they would have incorporated more animal killings. That's Cannibal Holocaust for another day. Yeah.
Cannibal Holocaust is a rough one.
Absolutely.
But at least the directors didn't have to worry about getting convicted for murder or anything.
Right.
Because that was certainly one of the things with Cannibal Holocaust. It was way beyond its, ahead of its time, I guess, in that sense. They did it at a very scary time. But and then there was another one, and I'm trying to remember what it was that came right around the same time. And at first, they were going to sue the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, you're talking about the one in the Jersey Devil one.
Was it called No, was it The Last Broadcast?
The Last Broadcast. That's about the Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
Well, it's not about the Jersey Devil. It's in the Pine Barrens. It's along those lines. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
They were going to sue the whole Blair Witch Project team, and they changed their minds and used it as their marketing. If you liked the Blair Witch, you might like this movie.
I think
interesting.
I've seen The Last Broadcast. It's a different kind of film using the same techniques, but it's not supernatural, right?
Right.
But it is brutal in its own way. I don't know. I liked it. They're very different. One's Ginger, one's Marianne. I'm still glad to be on the island with them.
Right.
Interesting comparison.
But that doesn't go for the sequels. This is very much like The Exorcist in terms of sequels.
You're talking about the Blair Witch Project.
That was a Blair Witch Project. Yeah.
There was one with Mr. T as well.
The Mr. T versus the Blair Witch. Yeah, there's some good ones out there. Karen disagrees with me on this one because she has class and I don't. But one of my favorites is the Blair Thumb. And there's just because there's some great lines. Like one, they have the old man out kind of fishing. And, he's like...
Anyway, a lot of kids were disappearing in the woods. Real mysterious like. Anyway, they thought it was maybe David Copperfield.
And... it's such a brilliant line. Yeah.
That's an unexpected Oliver Twist.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So,
okay.
Because
there's my English
he made
major
a llama disappear. Anyway.
Nice.
But the thing is that another one of the movies that was inspired by this was The Last Exorcism. And I thought that was brilliantly done up until the ending. I didn't like the ending, but the rest of the movie, I thought was fantastic. So there are ways to take this format and make a great movie out of it. And one that's convincing. And so I think you're right, because it does feel like lightning in a bottle and it'll never happen again. But people are creative.
Very unique. But I think we should go back to talking about the movie, because we talked about influences and all around it. I mean, there's so much to unpack. With the movie and the things that happen. And so we can backtrack about 10 minutes or something. We're talking about the three young filmmakers. So you've got Heather Donahue, and who now goes by Ray Hance. That's
smart move.
That's she changed her name, and she's retired from acting. Now she works. She grows medicinal marijuana, and I think that she's also working on a TV show about that too, and she's written a book called Grow Girl about her experiences as a farmer. But you also had two other characters. You had Michael Williams and Josh Leonard too, and so they start off hiking in the Black Hills near Burkittsville, and I thought it was a real slow burn the way that it happens, because at first they're joking around and they're hanging out, and then they travel and they're staying in the hotel room and drinking and smoking, and I mean everything just seems so chill and calm, the calm before the storm, really. and it just really builds up so well.
Well, and they do a good job of making you feel like they're film students making a film project, not professional filmmakers and not actors. They don't feel like actors.
No, they feel very real. Yeah.
And the increasing tension as they proceed through their peril, it feels pretty organic. I mean, they just, it keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up. Yet, this is it's not a movie with a lot of special effects. It's not a movie with a lot of gore. There's a little bit of blood here and there, but I mean, it's largely in your head. The scenes where I don't want to jump ahead too far, but like there's moments in the film where Heather's running around screaming and saying, "What was that?" It's terrifying. You know, it's you don't see anything, but your imagination fills in the worst things, right?
And you know, that was an accident.
No, I didn't know that was an accident.
It was a misstep, I guess you'd say. The art director was dressed in complete white long johns with like white pantyhose over his head, and he was running out in the woods, and Heather was supposed to pan toward him, and she was so freaked out that he never showed up on tape at all or on film in any sense.
Far scarier.
Yeah, so it was actually scarier to not have this ghostly figure running through the woods, but to leave it to your imagination.
Right,
so,
but every ghost hunter show that shows up in the 2000s, what was that? Literally becomes like that's
a calling card. Yeah,
exactly.
It's the catchphrase of the 2000s.
Well, I think it's I think it's interesting too that because watching it in the cinema, you have a very different experience. Everything's all around you. You can hear the screams, you can hear the children laughing and the crying and the different sounds that they were apparently the directors were playing for the filmmakers. But watching it at home, I could not hear a lot of things that were being said. So again, I think my mind was really filling in the blanks and just imagining all the terrible things that they could be seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
And certainly when Heather has a monologue, I mean, I'm really jumping further down the track of the story, but where she talks about how she's too scared to close her eyes and yet she's scared to keep them open. I thought that was very clever. It
was a great monologue.
Excellent improvisation.
Yeah, because it's great to know that was not written ahead of time. You know, that was off the cuff, and it's gorgeous the way that fell into place.
I think the directors had been slipping them notes every morning and saying, "Oh, this is what you have to do," individually too. So one actor didn't know what the others were doing at the time. But they really have some scary experiences in the woods. You know, when the tent is shaking and they just keep.
In that monologue, you know, there's tears and the mucus, and it seems like special effects, but it's not.
So how long have you been waiting for that one?
About 3 minutes, Matt. About 3 minutes. That's
nice.
That was low hanging fruit, definitely. But it had to be done. I appreciate you.
They really come across some creepy things, and so I think we should talk about some of the kind of symbolism that you see in the movie because they don't explain a lot of it. And I think I was saying to Matt throughout it, what do you think this means, and what was the purpose of this? And I think it really could be anything that you wanted it to be. But when you think about those stick figures and how they come across those stick figures just hanging from tree limbs in the forest.
Right.
I mean, it made me.
They're supposed to be looking for a graveyard. They never find the graveyard, but they do find stacks of stones, and then eventually they find, as you say, these stick figures. And it's unexpected because they're lost. They're not where they're supposed to be.
Well, I think with those the piles of rocks, I think that those were because they came across 7 at one point, and I think those were meant to represent the 7 children who had been murdered, and then the next morning they wake up and they find 3 around their campsite. So it seems like at that point their fate was really sealed.
They're marked.
Interesting. I like that idea.
So. Yeah, and that's what I was feeling too. But Eduardo Sanchez also said that the moment that they saw the stick figures hanging from the tree, that was the moment that they were never going to leave the forest again.
Right. That's what do they call that? They've entered a liminal space, which starts out with them. Maybe they're just lost, but there's this beautiful moment that I absolutely love in the movie when they're traveling. They decide to travel downstream because really, if you're lost, you just travel downstream. You're gonna find your way to a bigger body of water and get out. Right.
That's what they say.
they find themselves right back where they were, which is impossible. And then Heather's losing it. It's so
going around
good.
in circles.
I love that.
Yeah. But I want to say about the stick figures that when I first saw them watching the movie in the cinema, it made me think of the Crucible and the Poppets and just these kind of early little, toys or dolls that kids might even make for themselves. But watching it this time, I was thinking more of the crucifixion. That was kind of the imagery that came to me. I mean, whatever you put onto it or whatever you think about it, it's creepy.
That these are bodies hanging from the tree, or symbolizing bodies hanging from the tree, kind of thing.
And they do look. They seem like because they're rustic. They're figures. They feel occultish. They feel ritualistic.
There's a voodoo doll aspect.
Later on in the TV show True Detective, they have these similar wooden structures that are called devil snares. They're not related, but it's the idea of these rustic pagan constructions showing up implies a deeper tie to the metaphysical, the occult, the magical, the ritualistic.
Yeah, there's other things at work here.
Yeah. And if you don't know anything about that, it's just peculiar. But if you do know anything about that, it has a much deeper meaning to you. So,
well, even this time, when Josh was talking about, they woke up one morning and he said, hey, who put slime all over my clothes, and all their stuff was ransacked and thrown all about. This time I thought, wow, slime. That kind of made me think of ectoplasm.
Exactly.
About what you were talking about. What was your theory about that? And
well, what ectoplasm is supposed to be. I mean, you're not dealing with a living creature with this Blair Witch. This is a more along the lines of demonic or ghostly.
And ghost witch.
The barrier between our world and the other world is lined with this slime. So if you come through, you're bringing it with you, and that's kind of one of the theories of ectoplasm. Is you've crossed through that barrier. So it's kind of an interesting thing that this slime was all over Josh's stuff.
And then he's the one who disappears first.
Right. Yeah. She marked him.
Yeah.
And speaking of that too, when Heather finds the bundle of sticks, so we were watching an interview with the director too, and apparently the first time she came across that, she picked it up and what the hell's this? And she threw it aside and kept going.
Footage of her throwing it.
So then they left her a little note and they said, no, go and open this up. And she opens it up and you see part of Josh's shirt, and then you see it's pretty nasty stuff in there, some blood. I thought it was interesting to hear the director talk about what was in there as opposed to what you see everywhere. I mean, he said, what was it, Matt, that there was a lock of Josh's hair
and several teeth that they had gotten from a dentist.
Nice. But it's interesting, if you look on Wikipedia and if you listen to other interviews, people say, oh no, there was a tongue in there, oh there was a finger in there. So people
all I saw was teeth.
Me too, but people have come up with all of these things that they think that they saw and made it far worse than it even was.
Well, and I mean, if it's teeth, that kind of ties weirdly into fairy lore too, so
didn't even think of that.
Into fairy lore.
So much to see into this. I mean, if you are that way inclined, and as you said, like if you have any kind of knowledge of these things, you really see a lot more into it.
Well, here's what was kind of fun about it. You have this movie that didn't actually have a script. It was all made up in the heads, for the most part, of the actors. So they improvised so much, and they led the story where it was going to go. But still enough there was unsaid that the audience got to write the rest of the story themselves.
Definitely.
And you don't see that very often because we get hammered over the head with what meaning this has and blah, blah, blah. Because a
disappointing
lot of
endings.
And a lot of filmmakers don't have any respect for their audiences. They feel their audiences are stupid and have to be told everything. This was a case where we really did get to interpret it however we wanted, and it made it a lot of fun. You go back and you read the critics that said the movie was incredibly boring. Well, you know something about that critic from that moment.
Exactly.
It's I think
but
it
I do
was
think you need
amazing
to
in
see
that
the
sense.
whole package. I think you need to be set up for it and have that kind of priming too. You watch the documentary, then you're really going into that with this fear of, well, I know what happened at the end. I know, but how did they get there? Well, what happened in between?
It's like the Blair Witch experience, like, right? The ideal experience is to, first of all, be alive in 1999, old enough to go see an R-rated film. Use the primitive dial-up You know, get on that internet and
now I'm gonna have nightmares.
Yeah. Get those web pages loading, get past those under construction animations and get down there and get those details. The people that made the film, you know, they had this experience in mind. They wanted you to go mine for the details. And again, we saw the same sort of thing happen with the Paranormal Activity people. They were like, yeah, go read the lore, you know, find out, you know. And there's definitely a sort of it's like if you go to a haunted house, like if you don't know anything about the story and they don't have somebody guiding you through it, you might put together a narrative. But people build stories. I mean, we do. I mean, if you just get like a series of photographs just randomly and start looking at them, you'll start to put together, oh, these people, there's a connection here. You know, it's just we naturally want to tell stories. And so I think you could do that. I was really trying to pay attention to it. I think last night, I think there's enough material in the film to tell the story okay. I mean, you would get it, you know, but it's certainly a richer experience if you see the documentary, and even more so if you were able to go browse the web and see some of the other stuff that they had additional material. And with the archive, I believe it's still there.
Yeah, I was going to go looking for it and see if I could put some pieces in. So
yeah, the website wasn't there, but I think that's why I liked it more this time, because I was able to go and watch the documentary and then see the film back to back, and it was really a much better experience than missing half of it, feeling nauseous at the movie cinema.
Yeah, well, the thing is you miss half of the experience if you don't see the documentary.
Yeah, true.
And it's, I don't know if that's a failing or just great marketing or what exactly that aspect would be. But yeah, I mean, it was in so many ways brilliantly done. One thing I found interesting is the directors were interviewed about the success of it, kind of close to the time that it had been released. And they were asked if there was going to be a sequel. And one of the directors said, if we have a good idea. You know, if we have a good idea, because the way this was done, it can never be done again, like we were saying earlier.
Right.
But if we have a good idea, we'll do it. Otherwise, we're going to let Artisan do it and let them mess it up. Because we don't want to be the ones to mess it up.
Right.
And I think they were involved in the first sequel, if I remember. I can't recall, but it was messed up.
But it has spawned so much more. I mean, there are novels and computer games, video games,
books and
comic books. Yeah, I mean, there's so much has come from that. It's really you set off a lot of other things.
Parodies.
If
you've seen The Witch, the movie The Witch from a couple of years, 2019, I think.
Oh yes,
it's a lot like this, but with a traditional storytelling mode, like with a traditional narrative.
Right.
So I mean, this movie could have worked as a traditional film, because especially all the deep backstory, they could have had period pieces.
If they'd done a cinematic prequel. That wasn't found footage, but just telling the story of Ellie.
It'd be beautiful. I mean, that'd be great, you know. But I like what it is. I mean, it's its own distinctive piece of storytelling. It captured this moment in cinema history. And then of course it made people standing in the corner a spooky fun thing to do for 2 or 3 years. I've got home movies where like there's perfectly normal stuff going around, and then there I am standing in the corner and I'm laughing, and they make no sense now. They make no sense, but I've got a bunch of I kept doing it and kept doing it. So
I do want to talk about the ending as well, and I think it was interesting how they...
Can I butt in really quickly before you go there and say, when I was actively doing more paranormal investigation and, you know, taking photos of the location all over, there would always be one photo with me standing in a corner.
I thought you were just wearing the dunce cap and just in trouble. That's usually the reason.
Looking back on it now, that's what it looks like. Baxter's in trouble again.
No, because I do remember, and I didn't think I even picked it up then when I saw those, but I think it's kind of almost a relief in the movie. You're, you know, at the end, and I mean, they're going around and around in circles and just having to just hike and then to camp and hike and then camp, and nothing's happening. And so I think it is such a relief when they finally come across this house and you think, oh, I mean, even knowing what's going to happen, maybe they're going to get saved, maybe there's someone in there. But yeah, I think that ending was really fantastic with that abandoned house, and how
Oh, so
creepy it
much
was when they went in there and the
anxiety.
little children's handprints around the walls. That was very, very
And
eerie.
magical sigils. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, different symbols all
Yeah.
around there. And it was so disorienting too, because it was like you had Heather and you had Mike. They couldn't find each other, and they was looking for Josh and thinking he might be in the house or in the basement. And I found that part was very disorienting to watch as well, even on a much smaller television.
Yeah. I there's things like the last shot, you know, it's revealing. If you've been paying attention, if you saw the movie, paid attention, you would understand why there's someone standing in the corner.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You'd also understand why both the cameras end up on the ground like that.
But I think it's creepy
Yeah.
too, the fact that he is standing in the corner, but he's not saying anything. He's not replying, and she's
Right.
screaming,
Yeah.
Mike, Mike, and he's just not answering. So
Yeah.
you just thinking, is he going to turn around and do something?
Yeah.
Is he alive? Is he dead? It really brings up
Yeah.
lots of questions about
Yeah.
what the hell's going on there.
Oh, so we're at the end. I just wanted to mention that the film company themselves, like the people who produced the film, they call their company Haxan Films, which is, I assume, an homage to the 1922 film Haxan, which is a really amazing, it's a silent film, but it's really an amazing witch story. It sort of like talks about witchcraft's witches as they were perceived in culture, but it's got the devil and people flying, like every kind of a thing that you can imagine from witch lore they put on the screen, and it's pretty spectacular. And but it's almost like it's kind of a documentary, but it's kind of a horror film. It's so I thought that was it's a nice touch that they would name that film. It makes it pretty clear that they're familiar with the material that they're toying with here.
Clearly,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And Karen, have you ever seen it?
I haven't. No, no. Blake said, "Oh, once I start talking about it, you'll know." But you are making me think too. Someone mentioned on Facebook the other day, it's 100 years since Nosferatu came out.
Oh,
I wonder if there's something that we could do, some
I've
angle
always
for
wanted
that.
to rewatch that movie.
For Dotes and to do something.
You know, they're supposed to be making a
connected to
movie
that.
about the voyage. They're calling it, I think it's called The Voyage of Demeter, which is the name of the ship that Dracula comes from Europe on, right?
Right.
Oh,
And
okay.
I loved it because basically it's cool in the story, because basically the ship like just drives itself ashore. Everybody's dead. Everybody's dead.
Even rats.
But I thought it's The Voyage of Demeter, and in our version we could call it the Voyage of Defeat. You see, because you see meters and feet. You see,
Or yards.
Yeah.
The yards.
it's unfathomable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I just want to say, Karen, that I do have Haxan, so we can watch it whenever you'd like, because I think because of Nosferatu, Karen and I really discovered just how cool some silent films are.
Oh, some of those classic films, yeah. I mean, just
So
creepy.
atmospheric and
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, but Matt, you wanted to make one more point for the
one of the things that I really, really appreciated about this movie was that it did not fall into any of the gratuitous kind of stuff that you might expect. You got two guys, you got one girl going out in the woods, and neither of them hit on her once. Neither of them made comments. There was one point where the camera sort of went by Heather's butt. It was like, I see a dirty behind. And then like when she had to pee or something. But I mean, we saw Mike's breasts, not hers. And that was great that they didn't turn that into some sort of romantic angle or love story or just gratuitous sex. So
well,
because guys in scary situations, guys always use that as an opportunity. And
I think towards the end, it was Josh saying how they were all talking about the kinds of foods that they were missing, the things that they wanted to eat, and I think it was Josh who said something about wanting a piece of tail or something like that, and I mean,
but
even
did not reference Heather when he said it. It was
but even in the hotel scene earlier on, I was kind of when I watched it the first time thinking, something sleazy is going to happen. But yeah, you're right. They stuck to the horror aspects very well, and certainly for a movie that goes back that far, they did a good job of steering clear of that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what do we think? What do we think about this movie? How would we rate it? How many Bigfoots would we give it?
Out of how many? 5, 10?
5, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'd say watch it once every 10 years. It's good.
Yeah.
and watch it. Yeah, I think it's a must watch, and to watch it with the documentary as well. Watch those
for sure.
back to back, because it's a short movie too. So if you really do pair up the two, it really only amounts to about the same length as a standard movie.
Yeah, about half of a Marvel film.
By the way, I didn't find it even close to being as disorienting on the small screen as it was when I watched it on the big screen.
Exactly. So, yeah.
I found that very, very tolerable, I think is the right word.
Maybe if you've got a home movie theater, it might be different. But
maybe.
Right.
But this was a much better.
You don't want it to be an immersive experience.
No.
That's not comfortable.
No.
And that was another thing I enjoyed about like the Blair Thumb. You know, in the beginning when she's going over the books that she's read and everything for this.
Packing up here. You never can be too prepared. I like to think of myself as a super duper preparamedic. These are all my books. I'm very well read. Okay, that should do it.
Well,
yeah,
some truth there.
It all falls into place. Yeah, not a single tripod used in this film. No tripods were damaged in the film.
I want to say too, just to go back to the movie, Heather seems to have some respect for the witch and for the tale. It's not like they're going there and poking fun at these stories and all people are silly
Also
if they believe in this kind of thing. And so I think there's a point too where Josh knocks over some of the rocks. And I almost wondered if that wasn't kind of signaling, oh well, you've now stepped into my realm, you've you know, pissed me off, you've crossed my you know, my I can't think of the term I'm looking for, but
you've disturbed my peace, you've
made an incursion in my domain. So,
but when Heather is stockpiling them again, and she kind of kisses it, and you know, she has this respect. So you know,
that was like a little Blarney callback.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, kiss the Blarney Stone.
But yeah, no, I think that it is interesting, you know, and how they kept trying to say that it was rednecks that were doing this until until all the stick men hanging there, and then I think Mike says, "No rednecks this creative." So that was, and then you know, Josh making that comment. Did you ever see Deliverance?
They like, Whitland sticks and stuff. Yeah.
So it was kind of funny
it's a
how
redneck thing.
They at points they were trying to keep it grounded, you know.
And they did with comedy. They really did.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil this joke, so don't include this. But I just the in the movie when they're doing their whole big discussion about the captain of Gilligan's Island, and the one guy goes, "All right, you illiterate people, it's the skipper." I was like, that's the best joke in the whole movie to me. I
busted laughing when that was perfectly done.
It's very authentic.
That was funny.
Yep. And I'll probably include that anyway. Well, do we want to say anything about the stick figure that got used in all the promotion? We know that it was a creation of, like, I think it was the art director who might have created it, but he created it based on some old rune alphabet that he was looking at. Now I went through and I looked, you know, I always thought it was the Burning Man or something, but I went through and looked at a bunch of runes and I couldn't find it. So I think it may
maybe that's just part of the lore, you know.
I think it may be kind of a combination of two runes, really.
It just really made me think of the crucifixion, or you know, just puppets or voodoo dolls. Because voodoo dolls, people think, oh, it's a little kind of cloth figure and you stick pins in it, but they can be made from clay or from sticks or really anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does make sense as to have a forester with a rune with a view.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
On that note.
No, one last thing. Sorry. I remember what I was going to say, and that is the cycle. You know, like in Jeepers Creepers, he would come back. You know,
the repetitiveness.
The repetitiveness. So he'd be on this cycle, you know, kind of like a season. You know, we have seasons every year. This happens, or every, you know, so many years we have a super volcano and blah blah blah. It's kind of like this evil has a cycle.
Yeah, and every 50 years is a witch's period. Could be.
50, 40 years.
They weren't gratuitous. But yeah, so I did find that interesting too, that they kind of made it like it's this cycle, you know, that she's going to keep doing this, you know.
Well, yeah, you think maybe she's finally gone. Maybe she's resting in peace, but no, she comes back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Every
mean, nobody's
time.
really dealt with the sin, right? From strictly from a narrative perspective.
Very
A
true.
sin was
Yeah.
committed to her. She's never going to stop because no one's ever dealt with it, right? So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So,
Well,
you need
on
a
that
ritual to put her
note,
to rest. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you for watching this, and please do like this show and go back and watch our other shows too, and subscribe to our channel.
And like.
And patreon.com/monster talk.
What was that again?
Yes.
Patreon.com/monster talk.
Fantastic. I'm going there right now.
We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.